My name is Dan, and my life has always been somewhat solitary. I was always close to my brother, Marcus, but unfortunately, we rarely saw each other. Marcus lived in a small town that I knew very little about. However, everything changed suddenly when he called me and invited me to move to his village. Marcus explained that he urgently needed my help with some family matters related to taking care of our old family estate in that small town. I felt it was an opportunity to reconnect with my brother and start a new chapter in life. After a long journey, I finally arrived in the town. Marcus greeted me with a smile mixed with a hint of anxiety. He explained that he would have to leave for a week for family matters, and I had to stay and look after the house. I was concerned about how hastily he was going, but I agreed. The first few days went by smoothly. I explored the estate, examined old belongings, and tried to bring order to the place. But then strange events started to happen. One evening, while I was alone, I heard the doors creaking and sounded as if someone was walking up the stairs. I was sure I was alone in the house. My heart started beating faster. I got up and began investigating the house, but I found no one. In the evenings, when I went to bed, I felt the presence of someone else in the room. It was as if someone stood by my bed, watching me. I often woke up in the middle of the night, sweating, convinced that someone was staring at me, but the room always remained empty. With each passing day, the mysterious events became even stranger. Objects moved on their own, doors closed by themselves, and sometimes I heard voices whispering something indistinct. The house, which had initially seemed so quiet and peaceful, began to frighten me. I tried to call Marcus to tell him about the strange occurrences, but the phone reception was poor, and he could barely hear me. He assured me that he would return soon and resolve everything, but every day spent in that house felt like an eternity. Marcus returned after a week, and I told him about all the strange events. He nodded as if unsurprised and explained that there had always been something eerie about the house, but he never spoke about it to me to avoid scaring me. We decided to sell the estate and never return to this place. When I think about that house, I am overcome with fear. But I am glad to be back with my brother and not stay in that strange, mysterious house anymore. My story began on the evening I returned home after a long work week. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the top floor of an old apartment building. It was late, and the streets were empty, shrouded in darkness. Inside my apartment, everything seemed normal. I had dinner and fell asleep, slumped on the soft couch. However, a few hours later, I was awakened by strange sounds. At first, it was just faint creaks and rustling, as if someone were slowly making their way through my apartment. I half opened my eyes, trying to understand what was happening. The room was in darkness, and I could only make out vague shapes of objects. The creaks and rustling grew louder, and I was sure I was not alone in the apartment. My heart started pounding, and I cautiously exited the couch to regain my composure. My thoughts were racing, and I couldn't determine the source of the sounds. I dismissed it as my imagination and decided to go back to sleep. But then I heard something else: footsteps. Footsteps drew nearer to my bedroom. My apartment was small, and the sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer. I realized it was not my imagination and that someone was inside my apartment. My hands trembled as I desperately searched for something to defend myself with. I spotted an old baseball bat lying near the door. I picked it up, ready to protect myself if needed. The footsteps continued to approach, and I heard heavy, irregular breathing. My heart was pounding so loudly I felt it might burst from my chest. Then, suddenly, the door to my bedroom began to open slowly. My back tensed, and I prepared for the worst as the door swung open completely. In the darkness, I could see a figure standing in the doorway, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. What I saw froze me in place. It was my friend Jason, but he looked as if he had been dressed in clothes covered in dirt and blood. His eyes were filled with terror and madness. He began to move towards me, holding a knife, and his voice was distorted and incomprehensible. I couldn't understand what was happening or why Jason was in my apartment with a knife. I tried to reason with him, telling him to leave, but he didn't respond to my words. Suddenly, I heard the sirens of police cars approaching, and the apartment was bathed in red and blue flashing lights. I watched as police officers burst into the room and subdued Jason. It turned out that he was a wanted criminal who had been on the run. The police explained that Jason had broken into my apartment, trying to hide from them, and I had unwittingly become entangled in a dangerous situation. I was shocked but grateful that the police arrived in time. Since that night, I never returned to my old apartment. The memory of that night left an indelible mark on me, and I remain vigilant about the security of my home. My name is Max, and a few years ago, I decided to start a new life in a different city. My grandmother had passed away and left her old apartment to me in her will. It was a tiny, cluttered place filled with old furniture and the dust of time. I thought it would be the perfect spot for a fresh start. The first week was quiet. I spent my days trying to tidy up the apartment and my nights relaxing. But then strange things began to happen. The first time, it was a faint knock on the door when I was sure I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought it might be the neighbors or a passerby, so I brushed it off, but the knocks grew more persistent and unexpected. Sometimes, they would come in the middle of the night as if someone were knocking from inside my own apartment. Each time I opened the door, there was no one there. I thought it might be neighborhood kids playing pranks, but it began to seem like too simple an explanation. At night, I would hear strange noises and rustling from other rooms, even though I was alone in the house. Lights in the rooms would flicker on and off by themselves as if someone were toying with the switches. I started to feel that something was amiss in this apartment. One night, as I got up to use the bathroom, I saw something in the mirror that shouldn't have been there. It was the face of an old woman, like my grandmother, who had once lived here. I bolted out of the bathroom, but the face had vanished when I returned. Fear gripped me, and I decided to leave the apartment. I sold everything inside the following day and left the place for good. I never did find out what was happening in that apartment, but it indeed held something unseen that drew me in and forced me to leave. This story remains a mystery to me, a warning that some places may harbor secrets best left untouched.